The night was supposed to be harmless, forgettable, a quiet experiment in hope, but it cracked open the past like a fault line the moment the waitress's hand trembled and a folded note slid onto the white tablecloth. Candlelight flickered, wine breathed, and the room hummed with low laughter, yet something cold moved through him when he saw the words written in a hurried hand, a warning disguised as kindness, a sentence that felt heavier than the menu it hid beneath. In that instant, the future leaned in close and whispered that nothing about this evening would remain ordinary, and that sometimes disaster arrives dressed as rescue. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the idea that strangers can change the direction of a life with a single brave act, take a moment right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this only matter when they're carried forward by people who still believe. He had agreed to the blind date out of exhaustion more than optimism. Months had passed since the quiet collapse of a long relationship, months filled with late nights, half-healed mornings, and a calendar that looked full but felt empty. Friends insisted that the cure for loneliness was momentum, that movement itself could be medicine, so he dressed in a tailored suit he rarely wore and showed up early, sitting straight as if posture could keep his doubts from spilling out. The restaurant was warm and golden, the kind of place where promises felt possible, and when she arrived, smiling, confident, beautiful in a way that made heads turn without trying, he told himself to stay open, to stay kind, to not let fear write the ending before the story began. The evening moved smoothly on the surface. There was laughter, an ease that felt rehearsed but pleasant, a rhythm of nods and attentive listening. He noticed the way she spoke about success as if it were oxygen, the way she measured rooms with her eyes, calculating something invisible. None of it was wrong, not exactly, but it tugged at a quiet instinct he had learned to respect the hard way. He pushed the feeling aside, telling himself that healing sometimes required patience, that not every connection arrived wrapped in familiarity. He reached for his glass, grounding himself in the moment. When the waitress approached, her expression soft yet strained, as if she were carrying a secret too heavy for a stranger's table. The note appeared without ceremony, tucked beneath the stem of his glass as she pretended to straighten cutlery. Her eyes flicked toward him, then away, and in that split second he saw something like concern, something like courage. The words were brief, almost cruel in their simplicity, yet they detonated inside him. "She's not who you think." The room seemed to tilt. Sound dulled. The woman across from him continued scanning the menu, unaware that a stranger had just reached across an invisible boundary to protect him. Confusion battled with embarrassment. Paranoia tried to take the wheel. He considered a dozen explanations, including the possibility that the waitress was wrong, meddling, projecting her own story onto his. He folded the note slowly, feeling the weight of choice settle into his chest. This was the moment that defined more than the night. This was the moment that tested whether he trusted his instincts or ignored them again for the sake of comfort. Memory rose uninvited, carrying the echo of another time he had dismissed a warning, another season when charm had masked manipulation, when love had been leveraged into control. He remembered how long it took to rebuild himself after that, how trust had become a fragile thing, handled with gloves. The waitress returned with bread, her hand steadier now, her eyes avoiding his, as if she had already done what she came to do and was bracing for the consequences. He felt gratitude bloom where fear had been, a quiet respect for the courage it took to speak up without being asked. The rest of the evening unfolded with a new lens. He listened differently, noticed how stories shifted when pressed, how details contradicted each other, how affection appeared strategic, timed. Nothing explosive happened. No dramatic confrontation lit the room on fire. Instead, clarity arrived gently, like dawn. He realized that disaster didn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it came as a soft nudge away from a cliff you didn't know you were near. When the date ended, polite and intact, he lingered long enough to thank the waitress with his eyes, with a nod that said he understood the gift she had given. He left a generous tip, not as payment but as acknowledgement. Outside, the night air cooled his thoughts, and he felt something unexpected rise within him. Relief. Not because he had avoided something terrible, but because he had listened, because he had chosen himself without cruelty or drama. Days passed, and the note stayed folded in his wallet like a talisman. He replayed the moment, wondering what had driven the waitress to intervene. Curiosity tugged at him until it turned into resolve. He returned to the restaurant, not to chase ghosts, but to close a loop. He asked to speak with her, careful not to expose her, mindful of the quiet bravery she had shown. When they met, there was no grand exchange, only an honest sharing of why she had written the note. She had recognized patterns she knew too well, she explained in a rush of relief, patterns that had cost her years before she learned to trust her own perceptions. She hadn't wanted another stranger to learn the same lesson the hard way. In that conversation, something shifted. Two lives brushed against each other, not romantically, not dramatically, but meaningfully. He thanked her, not with flourish, but with sincerity. She smiled, lighter now, as if setting down a burden she'd carried since that night. They parted with a shared understanding that kindness didn't need an audience to be real. Time continued its steady work. He dated again, slower this time, listening more closely to the quiet voice inside. He learned to appreciate the difference between charm and character, between attention and care. The note faded from daily thought, but its lesson did not. It had taught him that trust could be rebuilt not by shutting out the world, but by staying present within it. Months later, on an ordinary afternoon, he ran into the waitress by chance at a small bookstore. They recognized each other with a laugh that surprised them both. They talked about books, about the strange paths people walk, about how moments of courage ripple outward in ways no one can predict. There was no urgency, no expectation. Just two people acknowledging a shared chapter that had changed them in small, permanent ways. As the seasons turned, he found himself in a relationship that grew quietly, rooted in mutual respect and patience. There were no grand gestures, no cinematic declarations, only consistency, honesty, and the slow building of trust. Sometimes, when the world felt heavy, he thought about that night, about how close he had come to repeating an old story, and how a stranger's compassion had redirected him toward a better one. Near the end of this story, before we let it rest, take a moment to comment and share what you believe the note truly represented, because your perspective matters and your voice completes the circle of this moment. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that small acts can carry enormous weight, please like the video, share it with someone who needs reassurance, and subscribe, because your engagement helps stories of quiet courage reach the people who need them most. The blind date that almost became a disaster ended up being a testament to human connection, a reminder that we are never as alone as we think, and that sometimes the universe speaks through the hands of a trembling waitress, offering not judgment, but a second chance wrapped in empathy.